Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is part two of the Tom Sumner Program. Part one, I want to say thanks again to Republican congressional candidate Alan Hardwick for joining us. Very interesting conversation. So if you're just tuning in to part two, or you're looking up the YouTube version or whatever, watching this after the live version, go back and catch that conversation. We got a chance to get to know him a little bit.
Some discussion of some really interesting topics. I mean, it's, again, particularly in the 5th District, that we don't always hear both parties as much as we often do. But
sometimes you don't even know a Republican is running in the 5th District.
Sometimes they aren't.
But, anyway, I'm Tom Sumner, along with Flint's premier political pundit Paul Rosicki. We have a guest coming up in just a little while. It's for 2 years in a row, a student from Baker College of Owasso has earned first place in a global business strategy competition. And we have this year's winner will be joining us by phone in just a little bit. His name is Trevor Kryza, and we'll have that conversation going on. But this is an online global strategy competition. And they set up a mock business and how they would market it worldwide and so on. And he placed first. We'll find out more about the program and how it works.
Sounds like an impressive honor.
But it's interesting, especially since we're coming to you online at flinttalkradio.com, that there are some contemplated changes to the internet that could change things very, very much. You know, how free should the internet be? How free do you think it should be? And I'm talking about net neutrality. Now, everybody's hearing about net neutrality, but nobody knows what it means.
It's kind of complicated. I saw a discussion last night. It is complex.
You and I might have seen the same conversation, because it was very interesting.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the idea that as we become more and more online, they need more and more,
especially some
juice to run it.
Major services like Netflix and some of those who really wants to pump a lot through the internet.
And so they want to create fast lanes and slow lanes and make the fast lanes a little more expensive. And it started to remind me of a little boondoggle outside Washington where they have a toll fast lane.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Have you've seen the place? You know what I'm talking about. That's kind of what we're talking about here, and what that means to places like right here, flinttalkradio.com. Startup internet companies where they're used to getting online, having the good service, being able to pump things out as fast as you can get them anywhere.
But they're not going to be able to pay the fees that Netflix is going to be able to pay.
And some are already starting to pay those higher fees. And that's where the higher fees are going to trickle down to the consumer.
I think so.
And that's what they're talking about, is there are really two problems with it. And I think, did I hear something like 3 million people have already contacted the FCC and the new director there? I can't think of his name.
I know I have gotten within the last couple of months many emails raising that very issue, saying
sign this petition, call your congressman, call the FCC, etc. Mostly it's people panicking because they don't know what it'll be.
Yeah, and it is a complex issue apparently. Again, I am hardly an expert on this kind of thing. But
I'm not either. But it was interesting to find out more than I've been able to find from the scary posts.
That's right. Yeah, the scary post world. They're going to shut the internet down, or they're going to charge you by the letter or something.
Yeah,
like that.
It's going to cost lots more money.
Yeah,
that's the big scary thing. But it could slow things down a little bit.
Oh yeah, for the routine stuff, or again for Flint Talk Radio, or 1,000 other smaller startup internet companies, they could face a real challenge. Now it may be cheaper for them, but it's going to face a real challenge compared to the big operators to who can kind of pump their stuff through at full speed.
And that's a big one, and we should be watching.
Yeah, and it does does require some real attention because, as I say, at least the details I saw last night in one report, I think it was on PBS, the PBS news program last night. It is complicated and it gets kind of technical in terms of how it all comes together. But the bottom line is it could end up costing us more money and could be a place of burden on the smaller startup companies.
Well, it'll make it harder for them to compete.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's going to be problematic. The stuff hasn't even been written yet. It's still being talked about. So this is the time to make a little noise. And this sort of ties into what we talked about last week when we were talking about fact-checking political ads.
Check those ads.
This is a story that's going to impact millions and millions of people around the world.
Yeah.
And it's a time to
both check the facts and, again, to some degree,
Look
to learn the technology. Because, like I say, there's a lot of technical stuff here, but to learn exactly some of the details of how that aspect of the internet truly runs.
Now, the other thing, and this, we talk about local stuff and state and national stuff. And, oh, by the way, happy birthday, Eric Mays. Flint City Councilman Eric Mays' birthday is today, so we'll give him a little shout out. Yeah. Anyway, but here's one from the international stage, but it's really the stuff that political punditry dreams are made of. Yeah. On Thursday, the people in Scotland will be voting whether or not to become independent from the United Kingdom.
They will, and everybody thought this was a done deal, that they were never going to go for this idea, but all of a sudden, the last couple of days,
it's polling neck and neck.
They're very close.
The Prime Minister, is it David
Cameron?
Made a last-minute appeal. He visited Scotland.
A few deals to the Scottish folks to stay with us, don't rock the boat too much.
We'll give you a few more powers and all of that.
Just yesterday, I ran into my wife.
And what was interesting is the little bit that I've seen about it, that I've been able to find out about it, is it seems to be gender and generation neutral. It's not like the older generation wants to keep things the way they are, or they're the ones that want to change it, or it's young people wanting to change or saying, why bother with change?
Yeah.
It's...
the take I've seen, and this may not be the final word, is that it may be that the big institutions, the major industries, the major banks, they were all in favor of staying with England. To some degree, the working class, the folks, or either lower middle class, those folks are a little more upset and seem a little more inclined to vote yes to break away from England. And there may be other factors in there as well, but I ran into some friends who had just come back from England within the last couple of weeks yesterday, and they were in Scotland, and they were really surprised at how strong the campaign, the Yes campaign, the campaign to break away from Scotland was. A lot of signs.
And that is how it works. It's yes to leave, no to stay.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is this is the single biggest vote that has ever faced Scotland voters independently in something like 350
That's right. They've been part of the United Kingdom for 300 years. This could break it away.
First time in 300 years they get a chance to decide something on their own.
That's right.
And this is it. And it's a biggie.
It is very big. There's speculation about what the ramifications are, but what will it mean for NATO? Will it begin the breakup of the European Union? What about currency itself?
Currency was the one that I saw that looked the most troublesome, because most of the Yes campaigners think they're going to stay on the pound. And the UK is saying, maybe not so much.
That's right. As a matter of fact, I learned something from our friends we just ran into, that there is a slightly different Scottish pound even today. It's still a pound, but it's got a different design than the one in England proper.
So they do have a mint. They are printing currency
the coins are the
internally.
same, but the printed money is slightly different. And it has got a Scottish design or a Scottish leader on it compared to what you'd find in London, for example. So there already are some differences, but it is the same currency. It's still the pound, even with the slightly different designs. So, but if they break away, there is a big question about do they keep the pound? Do they have to cook up their own kind of currency or something else? Or do they go with the euro? Who knows? There's some really, and again, there's other issues that have been tossed out about what does this mean for, pensions for somebody who earned a pension from the British government and now is in Scotland. Is that going to affect them? What is this going to mean for employees who work for the British postal system who are now in Scotland?
One small businessman was concerned about the fact that most of his sales were to people in the UK, and it would no longer be buying local.
That's right. Would there be a tariff between these two countries?
Right.
Yeah,
With the change of the flag too, because that's the cross of St. Andrew and the cross of St. George over the
Right.
the Union Jack.
Right.
So that'll change the shape of the flag too.
That's right. Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting election. Anyway, that's coming up on
and some huge
Thursday.
implications. I mean, not just for the Scottish, but for England and really for all of Europe. It could have some really big ramifications.
Well, and how much of the British Empire has been lost
Wow.
and is left to go?
There's a few associated things that are part of the Commonwealth. I guess Australia's left, but India's gone its own way, obviously. But yeah, the old British Empire, where
Canada is virtually independent.
Yeah, I mean, technically they're part of a Commonwealth, but they're independent for all practical purposes. The old idea that the sun never set the British flag. Ireland has gone its own way, obviously. So yeah, this could be the last crumbling of even more than the British Empire, of the United Kingdom itself, if it goes that way. I don't know.
What's your feel?
I
We haven't seen a lot about it over here.
Yeah, not much at all. In fact, I didn't even hear about it.
But they also do campaigns different over there. This thing hasn't been, they haven't been hammering people with ads for a year and a half. They spend a couple weeks on a campaign, people vote, and then they go on.
Yeah, my gut reaction. I say this because I've heard no polls or anything that means much.
All I've heard is that the polls are running pretty neck
that's
and
all
neck.
I heard. All of a sudden, that's what got my attention. My guess is, and it's purely a guess, is they're going to stay with the British Empire. I think, but I can't prove that. It's just the hunch. And I say that because I think there'll be
At the end of the day, they're going to be peeking around a corner to see if there are any redcoats out there.
That's right. That's right.
Oh well,
but that's well worth watching. It's a fascinating story. That say really from at least from our perspective, just came out of the blue. I don't think I heard even mention of it 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I understand too that Israel's actually concerned about the people of Israel because the Scottish independence movement actually usually leans towards the left, and that's very critical of Israel too.
That's right.
It was on Facebook on JTA, so it's like they were critical. They were concerned about that too, because a lot of these, like the Irish Republican Army, for example, used to be connected, is like usually leans in heavy favor of like the Palestinian PLO, and they train together at times. So
this is going to be something definitely to watch, not just the horse race on Thursday, but then what has to happen developmentally
if they say
afterwards.
Yes, what happens after that? And as you point out, this could change the politics of England proper. You pull out a whole section of generally left-leaning members of Parliament. That's going to change the makeup of England proper.
And the Conservatives are in power.
Oh yeah,
in
they'll
Great
be
Britain.
much more in power if this all should take place. Yeah.
We were talking in the last hour with congressional candidate Alan Hardwick, the Republican running in the 5th District, and we touched on something that's come up in the news just recently, and that has to do with corporal punishment. And did you see this
story?
You mentioned the NFL player from the Vikings.
Peterson?
Peterson is his name.
Yeah.
And he's claiming that he virtually had done the old Tom Sawyer thing of pulling a switch, and was
when I first heard the story, I just said, well, gee, he spanked this
well,
kid.
it was in the wake of this other player that beat his wife in the elevator.
Right. What's his name here? Rice, who beat his wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Ray Rice.
Yeah. But when I first heard the story, I said, well, maybe he spanked him a little hard. But then, again, this is only from a few media reports. Then I guess there was a medical report where these were open wounds and the kid was bleeding and all of that. If that's true, this went well beyond a spanking, apparently. So my views changed as gradually as some of the stories came out, if assuming some of the stuff is all accurate. There.
Well, yeah, initially, well, and you know, the NFL hasn't figured out what to do. They've got a
Right.
PR problem.
They really do.
But they have PR problems all the time with these guys.
Oh, well, I mean, how many of these NFL players have had felony convictions? You know, the one problem that I see is that where do you draw the line between the legal system and punishing somebody before it happens? I mean, you know, after
Corporately.
there's a charge against Peterson. There's a charge against Rice. Nothing's been proven in court yet, and it won't be for a long time if and when it ever happens. But you kick somebody out right off the bat because there was a charge made, and again, a lot of NFL players and others are charged with offenses. On the other hand, if you're going to wait for the courts to work, this could be a matter of years if you work through the whole court system and appeals and everything else. So the NFL's got a dilemma. There's a due process rights these folks ought to have. They shouldn't be found guilty, be proven guilty until it's found guilty until it's proven. But on the other hand, you're going to let them play forever while in the public perception they're seen as wife beaters or child abusers and all the rest. It's a tough PR situation.
It is, and they've had. But you know what I can't figure out, and I'm sure there are tons of sports fans who will jump all over me because once somebody becomes a star, they're worth money in the bank. But as many people that are young athletes that are lined up that are waiting to get a spot in the NFL, some of these great college players from around the country, high school players coming up, it seems like. If somebody's giving you a PR problem, dump them.
Oh, there's somebody else in line. That's a good point. Yeah.
Get some new blood in there. Seems like.
And the fact of the matter is, the NFL, in some ways, is not really an athletic organization. It's a business, and the business depends upon PR. And to the extent that gets hurt, I mean, the folks who are running the NFL, I think, are very sensitive to the fact that they've got a multi-billion-dollar operation going, and the last thing they need is to be seen as a gang of felons running around on the field every Sunday afternoon.
And it's interesting that it's more women that are complaining about some of the things, some of the behaviors.
Yeah.
It's the female audience they're mostly concerned about.
Well, it's almost a majority, because that's 40-some% of the audience they say is female, I think.
Yeah.
For the NFL games.
But you know why? They're the ones that are making the buying decisions of the products of their advertisers.
That's true.
So of course women are gonna.
That's true.
They may be 40%, but they count 70%.
They're the ones who go to the store.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Or at least that's how it's typically been.
Yeah.
Cell phone started going on. I should turn it off before I do this, but actually I should look and see if it was something.
Are they calling in for the next call?
I was going to see, maybe it's.
It is about that time.
Yeah, that could be. Well, I sent the right phone number, so we'll see what happens. Oh, I've got no service anyway.
But yeah, I think what's interesting to me for the NFL stuff is how the legal issues play their way out. Because as I say, legally you could argue, well, gee, you ought to wait till the courts play out, and these guys got to get found guilty. But that could be a long, long process. And by the time that happens, these will be long forgotten events, but could tarnish the image of the NFL in a real serious way.
Yeah, that's going to be something we'll be watching off and on. And whoa, that was kind of
that woke us up.
That wasn't my cell phone.
Yeah.
No, anyway, I think what we have is our guest calling in, and he is Baker College of Owasso student Trevor Kriza. Kriza, thank you for correcting me, Trevor, and welcome to the show. Trevor has won first place in the Online Global Business Strategy Simulation Competition. I can't even believe I said that without stuttering, Trevor. Exactly what is that?
It's pretty much you running your own business. In this case, it was you were selling cameras two different kinds. You had a mid-range, a high-range camera. You could sell different models along that lines.
Were you given the camera challenge, if you will, or did you come up with a product and decide that's what you were going to do?
It's pretty much everyone does the cam. Every college you compete against, every team you compete against, they're all doing the same thing. It's all the same market. You're just trying to do better than they are in all the different areas of selling and marketing and manufacturing of the cameras.
And who are the people who decide who wins, and where do they come from?
I think it's actually, if I remember right, McGraw-Hill, who you guys probably know as a real big textbook company.
Mhm.
They
Right,
actually
right.
make the program. And it's all put into your decision, everything's put into a computer, and everything's, calculated based on how well you did in your decisions.
One thing I wanted to ask you, just because we were talking about it a little earlier, is with your experience doing this, what would net neutrality do to somebody who was launching a project as you just did?
Oh, the net neutrality, as they were just, ooh, sorry, been just getting over a cold. I am actually not really sure. I've actually never worked with a program like this before. It's my actually first time ever doing a business simulation,
Uh-huh.
to be honest.
Is there a chance it would slow down if when it's went into operation, would it slow down your operation over the internet, do you think?
I really wouldn't think so.
Now, how did you get interested in taking this challenge and doing this competition?
It was part of one of the final parts of getting my bachelor's degree. So everyone in the class had to do it. So you pretty much competed against your class. I actually made a lot of fun. It was pretty much bragging rights among the class how everyone was doing in the competition. And we did an initial, warm up where the teacher ran it. We just competed against the class, see how well we did. And I said, I'm actually doing, pretty good at this. So then when it took time for the actual competition, I actually think I spent a good 4.5 hours setting up my initial statistics, which range from anything from deciding how many megapixels I wanted each camera to be, optical zoom, how many models I wanted to make, how many different features I want each camera to have. Because you could go with either, like a low range, a mid range, and a high range, even though you're doing both for, a mid-range camera and a high range, but you still, you have better models. You have your Samsungs and you have your Walmart cameras.
Is the competition truly global, or is it one of those that because there are some people from Canada, it's considered international?
It is truly global. One of the colleges I actually saw on there was University of Iraq.
And there
One of the
were
ones I actually saw on there that was competing.
46 colleges from universities nationwide, or worldwide rather, and 500 people competing, or similar businesses?
500 teams. A lot of them you saw were teams of 4. Some people, our class, we all did as sole proprietors. With other ones, they actually have teams of up to 4 or 5, where they're actually all helping each other out.
Now, this is the second consecutive year that a student from Owasso, from Baker College, has placed first. And for 7 years, Baker College has landed in the top 50. Have you formed an opinion about why why they seem to be doing so well in this?
I had to say number one, it has to be my instructor, Patricia Barber. She pushes us to our absolute limits. It's a capstone class, and that's one of the hardest classes I've ever taken. It took every moment of my time. I mean, I actually worked 2 jobs while I'm in college, so I had pretty much no free time whatsoever.
Then, now you actually, this isn't just like, setting up a Facebook page and seeing how many hits you get. What all is involved in, in marketing, establishing the business, incorporating a business plan into this project?
Pretty much what you do, you look at all the figures you have in front of you, and you have investor expectations. You have to have a certain image rating. How people see your company, return on equity, and all that. You have all these figures. You go to the side and you type in your numbers, and actually on the side it shows you like how it can affect like say I want to put this much into it, say I put 700,000 into marketing, and that go to the side shows you how each decision is affecting, each one of those. Say you wanted to have, I don't know, a good image rating, but you might hurt your return equity because you may be selling at a low price, but you're not making a profit for your investors. So the smallest decision can have the biggest impact on anything you make in business, and this program shows you that.
Now, how do you account for the fact that your stock was listed at $563.10 a share, and the second place was almost $200 cheaper, but you outperformed that team by 44%?
Pretty much what happens with that is I actually build the way you have I don't know, over the 8 weeks you have I think it's up to 12 decision rounds you make. Each decision round, the instructor reset, all the instructors reset it, you make a new decision round. And I just started out, I went with the mid-range cameras, I set a good price and all that. And just over each decision round I kept improving my company. I was, making investments in green technology and, giving good health insurance. And that just shows how it all affects it. There's so many things you do to my employees, and each one, I ended up with a 100 image rating, and my company just went up and up from there.
And how does that happen? Because people aren't actually buying stock. So how, what's the yardstick? How do you measure?
Well, people are technically buying your cameras. It's all simulated as a simulated business. So people are technically in the virtual world buying your cameras.
Uh-huh.
So that's how it's done. Every single time I had to reset every figure because I wasn't meeting demand every time. So every time I had to keep on raising how many cameras I produced, and I had to hire more virtual employees per se. So it's definitely interesting. It's definitely a very in-depth program to really think. Like I said, you got 500 teams from 46 colleges. So.
Yeah, but I'm still wondering, how do they, how do people virtually, or how do people simulate a purchase? How do people simulate investing in stock?
I guess it's just the way the program, I would say it had to be the way the program's just designed through. I guess they might take a market average from the real world and just put that program into the actual program.
There's no real money involved here, is there, or is there?
No,
No,
there's no real
simulated,
money
okay.
involved. It's almost, I guess, the best way to put it, it's almost like a really, really advanced video game.
I see.
Okay. But I just wondered who's participating besides you, because you can't go in and say how many it's going to sell.
No, but what happens is each team makes these decisions, and then it's pretty much like that. The best decisions, the best marketing strategy wins. The computer takes every single team into account and just calculates it.
Then, now this is, I think you told me this already, that this is a required part of the strategic management course.
Yes.
Now that you've been through this experience, what's next for you? You've got your bachelor's degree. You're going to continue on in school. You're going to go into business. You're going to sell cameras. What are you going to do? We're working my 2 jobs. I'm going to wait for the right opportunity to come along. I have 2 jobs I'm secure, and I work nights at Kroger, and I substitute teach, of all things. So I'm just going to weigh out my option. I won't jump into the first opportunity that comes along once I find the right one. And yes, I actually talked to my instructor about it, and she's just to wait a few years before I go back. I will be getting my master's in business administration at some point.
Will this award be a big plus on your resume as you go out there looking for new opportunities?
Oh, definitely. I would definitely mention this on my resume. I mean, it wasn't only a lot of fun, but it was challenging. It took a lot of time to do.
Well, and according to this, his company was one of the best performing companies. It tied for first with 15 competitors. He was the sole recipient and the clear winner by a large margin of first place in 2 categories: the stock price his effort outperformed the second place team by 44%. And
Impressive.
in the earnings per share, and he outperformed the second place team by 34%. These are amazing statistics. It placed 11th in return on equity, and his return on equity was 58.7%.
That's impressive, no matter how you cut it.
That is
Yeah.
impressive. So I'd make sure that you write that all up in your CV.
Oh, I definitely will.
All right, Trevor. Well, thanks for taking time with us. Congratulations, and good luck with everything that you do.
Thank you for your time.
Congratulations.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye. That was,
Yeah,
did
very
I say
impressive.
Trevor? How did I said it wrong? I said Kriza, and he said Kriza.
Frieza
Trevor
Looking for a
Kriza. I'll
second.
find it here.
in the booth.
Yeah, from Baker
Yeah,
Baker
very
College,
impressive.
and nice to hear. You know,
Good things are happening in this town, or at least in this area. And I must say, I had occasion a couple of weeks ago to do an article for the On the Town magazine on the new college presidents, and I got a chance to interview the Baker College president, Wen Hemingway. She took me around to some of the technology they had there, and I must say, I mean, the kind of things they're working in, I was impressed. They had some very, very
they've got some pretty interesting new
high-tech classrooms
program
and
things
everything else
going
that were
on.
really quite impressive.
They've got that new truck
Yeah,
campus
where
in
that's,
Owasso.
the old Superior.
No, I'm talking about in
Owasso.
Owasso.
No,
They're
that's
doing
right. I was thinking of the one off Dort Highway, the old
the
Superior.
transportation
Right, transportation
center.
center that's has their annual car show every May or so.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're doing some amazing things. Mott Community College has a new president.
that's right. In fact, I just met her today. I've seen her before and talked briefly, but had a chance to meet her sometime today at a meeting on the campus. So actually, we got 3 new college presidents in this area. Baker, U of M, Flint, and Mott, all within the last few months, have had a new president on board. They are all women. And even Kettering has a new president within the last 2 years. So the higher, Flint's becoming a college town, I think, and I think
The hierarchy of higher
hierarchy
education.
of higher education's all brand new within the last couple of years, and 3 of them within the last couple of months.
Pretty interesting.
And
development.
the thing that strikes me about all of them, I've had a chance to speak with all of them, at least to some degree, and they all do seem committed to the idea of beginning this process or continuing the process of making Flint a college town. Now, we talked about that for a long time around here, and it's happening here and there. It's got a long way to say. We're not Ann Arbor or East Lansing by any means, but I think they're all really kind of buying into the idea that as we move away from manufacturing, we're going to become some kind of a college town.
I kind of challenge that though about it. Michigan State. You add up all the colleges, all the colleges together and all the students together. I think we're pretty close to MSU's enrollment. If you
We
add
may
it
be,
all
the
together.
number I've heard mostly is 33,000. I've heard that toss. There's 33,000
Yeah.
college students in Genesee County. That gets you fairly close to Michigan State.
Yeah,
It's
so
a little
that's-
smaller, but in that ballpark.
Yeah, so I mean, it just a bit more. I mean, keep on chiming in today, but it's just that
Yeah.
I worked at U of M for several years, and when I was there, I see it much bigger than it was when I was there 13 years ago.
That disembodied voice, by the way, is John Wilson in Master Control. He jumps in and keeps us on track from time to time from flinttalkradio.com. We mentioned almost parenthetically in the first hour when we were talking with Alan Hardwick, who's running for Congress. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention about that I did, I've had Congressman Kildee, both Congressman
That's
Kildees
right.
actually on my radio shows over the years, multiple times. And I did contact Mitchell Rivard a couple times, left messages,
Yeah.
and left one very specifically about today, and didn't hear back from him.
Well,
So it is always my practice to give
give them both,
both
a shot.
sides,
Yeah, let's hope that the congressman will give us a call and show up sometime for an interview.
But we mentioned kind of parenthetically that this week is the Ken Burns'
Oh, it is-
documentary, The Roosevelts. Last week, I saw a preview of it
So did I.
during the public television
The
Begathon.
fundraiser, exactly. I was watching the same thing.
And but it was a nice tease for the series.
It was.
And although it started Sunday night on public television, I missed the first one because
Actually, I've seen every one, and I made a point. In fact, well, one of the stations, I think 28, runs two of them, and
they're running it back to back. They
so
play it and then
I
they
missed
play
part,
it
then I came
again.
back and watched what I missed later. But yeah, it's a fascinating series about the Roosevelts in terms of their personality, their family lives, and again, in terms of what we were talking about with Alan Hardwick earlier, the questions that were raised by Teddy Roosevelt about the nature of government, the nature of private businesses, and the nature of power are the same things we're talking about today.
I couldn't help wondering if today's political climate shaped the script to some degree.
Oh, I'm sure there's probably no escaping it, even if you tried not to. But I think in many ways it did, because Teddy.
But what's interesting about it, and this isn't a commercial for public television or even Ken Burns, but he does
a wonderful
he
job.
does some pretty amazing
I've,
things. But the thing that I find interesting about it is, I understand the relationships considerably better now because he's intertwining the lives of the
Absolutely.
three Roosevelts that he's focusing on. He's talking about Teddy Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt and FDR, of course, Franklin Roosevelt.
One of them. There's so many interesting things there. What struck me was the way that FDR idolized Teddy so much. I mean, he imitated him. He dressed like him.
And the other thing was that I never really fully caught on to the fact that Eleanor was a Roosevelt before she married Franklin.
Yeah, well, I knew she was in the family. Yeah.
That didn't connect with me somehow along the way, and I didn't realize the closeness between Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt. Teddy was so much older, and the
different
presidencies were very far apart,
Yeah.
and it seemed like Teddy was from a different generation, so there just wasn't that same connection.
Clearly there was a connection, and like I say, the way Franklin idolized Teddy's viewpoints on so many things, and tried to imitate him an awful lot, and I was almost goaded into being like Teddy by his mother especially, is fascinating, and at the same time, it's interesting to watch in terms of the psychology of how they really were in so many ways flawed individuals. They're great heroes. We have statues of them all over the place and that kind of thing, but they had these incredible insecurities. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was, by some definitions, would be called mentally ill today. I mean, he was a hyperactive kind of character. I think somebody said that today. If he was around, they put him on Ritalin and he'd be a salesman someplace.
Right.
But the kind of hyperactivity was a way of running away from a number of tragic things in his past. And Franklin was kind of this lightweight who wasn't considered to be a serious person at all, but yet he wanted to be like his uncle, like Uncle Teddy was. So
now, one of the things about this documentary that, for me, clouded the objectivity it had. There is some editorializing that goes on about how influential these people were. I think there's a case to be made. I mean, obviously they're some of the best known people from the last century, sure. But the integrity factors that get talked about, I wonder about a little bit, and I also wonder how the politicians of those eras, and I'm saying eras even though they were by historical senses somewhat contemporaries, but
20 years apart or so.
But
20, 30 years apart.
But 100 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt, usurped a tremendous amount of power for the White House.
You hear about the complaints about, Obama's using too much power. What Teddy did was astonishing. There's a great story. I didn't see it in the film, but a great story that I heard about Teddy Roosevelt, about how he used power. Of course, he built up the American Navy and wanted to make the U.S. a world power. And on one occasion, he sent he wanted to get money from Congress to send our Great White Fleet around the world. And Congress didn't give him the money. They cut his appropriations in half. So he sent the ships halfway around the world and said to Congress, okay, if you guys want them back, give me the rest of the money. And they did.
Well, he did basically the same thing with the Panama
Well,
Canal.
yeah, I mean, he caused a revolution in Colombia to break away Panama and then install his own people in it. I mean, it's as Burns shows, Mark Twain called him a terrible imperialist, and he really was. I mean, he really wanted to.
And you know, and it's
to
funny
conquer
the
Panama.
nuances because it was Teddy Roosevelt who, more than any other president, invoked the Monroe Doctrine.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But he fell short of actually making his own doctrine.
Yeah, the Roosevelt corollary.
Yeah, the Roosevelt corollary, exactly. Where he really just was expanding the power of the Monroe Doctrine, but he wouldn't be presumptuous enough to actually have his own.
That's right.
His
Well,
own.
you know, I always argue that what happened to the United States was we got into the game of imperialism in the ninth inning. I mean, if you go back to the 19th century and before, the major European powers always took great pride in the fact that, you know, the British flag flew all around the world, and the Germans had colonies all over the place, and the French did. And
Well, going all the way back to Rome.
oh yeah, and certainly the Roman empires. You know, the idea of proving yourself to be a great nation was to get colonies. And then all of a sudden in the 1890s, generally 1880s, 1890s, U.S. comes along, and we're sort of feeling our oats. We want to prove that we're a great nation. So we're looking for colonies. So there's not too much left. I mean, Africa's been carved up. The Middle East has been carved up. Asia's been carved up pretty much. So what we do is we go to war with Spain, who was kind of a declining power. We beat them up and take a few of their leftover colonies, Cuba, the Philippines. So again, we get a few colonies, but we kind of get in the game when the game is almost over by the next 20, 30 years or next
Well,
century.
and we started the whole domino of colonies not wanting to be colonies
That's
anymore.
right. Yeah. So then, as you get into the 20th century, all of a sudden these colonies gradually begin crumbling and falling apart as the British Empire and the French Empire and the German Empire and the Ottoman Empire all fall apart during World War I and World War II.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. I guess the question that I was really looking at is, how are the politics of today different from the politics then?
I wonder. I mean, in one sense, when you watch the program and these people are portrayed as being so incredibly noble, and I suppose in some ways they are. But I wonder if that's not the hindsight of history.
And yet
they were politicians.
And they're lauded for political skill
Oh, yeah.
and strategy.
And they did some pretty.
It's told as a funny story almost, or an amusing anecdote, how the Panama rebelled against Colombia and created its own state,
But we caused it.
and that was considered good politics.
Yeah. That's how you take over.
Or good strategy.
Good strategy to
Let's say
build a
good
canal.
strategy is a
Yeah.
better way to
Yeah.
put it.
But I mean, no matter how you cut it.
And we talk about Barack Obama, and before that, George Walker Bush.
Sure.
Tramping on civil rights and constitutional rights, especially, and usurping great amounts of imperial power for the White House, and yet it was
I'm not
Teddy
so
who built the West Wing.
Yeah. I don't think any modern day president could hold a candle to Teddy in terms of expanding presidential power. Now Lincoln maybe, because that was unusual times, but except for Abraham Lincoln, I don't know if anybody expanded presidential powers as much as Teddy did. And like I say, when you hear Republicans talking about, Obama's a dictator, they wouldn't he couldn't hold a candle to what Teddy did in terms of redefining the presidency. Because before that time, the presidency was almost the second major branch of government. The Congress was the real place of action. But after Teddy,
Well, in the
changes.
original model, it was supposed
Yeah,
to be
the
fairly weak.
Yeah, the first part of the Constitution is the Congress, not the presidency. The executive branch comes second. That was going to be the second place, and that was pretty much true up until except for Lincoln, I guess. Pretty much.
And
up to
you know
Lincoln's time.
what surprised me, and I really didn't realize it. Of course, most of us have looked a lot more at FDR
Yeah.
than Teddy Roosevelt, but I didn't realize how many firsts there were. I knew there were quite a few, but I didn't realize just how many. And I didn't realize that he was responsible for the Antiquities Act.
Neither did I. No, that was a new one for me as well.
And that's another presidential power grab.
Absolutely. Well, all the environmental stuff, the creation of national parks and all of that.
Now that I knew. I knew he was a
aware
big.
he had done some
He
of
was
that,
a big
but
conservationist.
I was not aware of how much he had done and how unique.
Well,
that
he
was.
doubled the number of national parks from
Yeah.
5 to 10.
Yeah.
You know, they're probably
I think
60 now. You know,
sounds good to me. Yeah, there's a lot
I'm
of
just-
now. Yeah.
I'm
So-
just guessing, but there's probably more than one in every state.
Yeah.
But at the time, you know, he was for a Republican and a fairly conservative figure.
In some ways he was, but in some ways, of course, in those days, the Republican Party was still the party of Lincoln, the Progressive Party, almost the radical party, at least a wing of it was. The Democrats, and this is like 1900, 1910, were still the party of the South, segregation and the old Confederacy and all that. So in some ways, the views of the two parties flipped by the 1930s with the New Deal and all. But yeah, the Republican Party was seen by some people in the 1890s, 1910s as the left, almost the radical party in the eyes of some people. It
And
probably was.
you know, he did some things that were a little fumbly with regard to race relations
Absolutely, yeah.
in the United States.
Interesting that they didn't shy away from covering that. That was an interesting point.
What's going to be really interesting to watch as the series goes further is there is a huge shift of black voters from Republican to Democrat,
Just
and I suspect that it went Roosevelt to Roosevelt.
pretty much.
And
that's
that
true.
may be a real weird anomaly
Yeah.
in American politics.
Yeah, in fact, it
that it was the programs, but it was also trusting a Roosevelt.
yeah, I think that's true. Now the change took place. I see you're right. I mean, if you
And if Franklin had run it as a Republican, you know, being similar to his uncle in some of his attitudes toward regulating business, toward conservation, towards, you know, fair taxes, the fair deal.
yeah, that was exactly it. Yeah, no, I mean the fact is that Teddy Roosevelt was the first person to have, you know, Booker T. Washington, a black person, come to dinner in the White House. Huge backlash in the Old South because of that. But he never invited him back. I was not aware of that fact till I saw the program.
And
And
that
then-
after the election, when he bailed on the group in Texas.
That's right. The soldiers who were.
But these are very interesting historical facts that some of which I did not know.
Yeah, there's a number of things I did not know in detail, and I've
And
read
that's
a lot of
saying
those.
something, because he
I've read a
looks
lot of
this
those,
stuff
Bill.
up.
But yeah, I was not aware of the timing of the fact when he dismissed all those soldiers in Texas. He waited until the day after the election to do it to keep the black vote. But if you were a black voter in 1910, and there weren't a lot around, but if you were going to vote for the party of Lincoln. That was the party.
You were a Republican.
Yeah, you're a Republican.
And that lasted right up until
Until at least FDR. And then there really were two changes. With FDR, gradually the black vote becomes more democratic, but still there's not much black voting in the Old South. Then the real big change comes with Lyndon Johnson in the 60s with
Yeah.
the Voting Rights Act. And then that's where you get, on an average election, even today, 85–90% of the African American vote goes Democratic, even without Barack Obama, and even actually a little higher with Obama. But it's always been in the upper 80s or low 90% Democratic in the average election the last 40 years.
right, and of course, that Voting Rights Act,
Yeah, that,
or
that,
was it
that was the real
Civil
real
Rights
siege.
Civil Rights Act of '64? I
64,
think is
yeah,
when he said to Bill Moyers, "We just lost the South for
And
40
He's
years,"
pretty much
and
right.
he was pretty much right on it.
Yeah, we're past 40 years now. It's still pretty much Republican, and it was the old South.
But
And
but
you
it is
couldn't-
changing. I mean, we saw a very
little
different
bit.
vote in the Obama
Yeah,
elections.
you saw a little bit of the cracking there, some of that kind of stuff. It is changing gradually, but we're now going.
And
on
interesting,
50 years.
talking about political predictions like that. Martin Luther King said it would be 40 years before they'd see a black president, and he was almost
Just about on the
exactly
button.
right on.
Just about on the button.
Those are interesting. Now, that actually ties me up to the last thing I wanted to touch on today, because we've been talking a lot this hour about the internet. We talked about net neutrality, and of course this internet competition and global competition that Trevor Crees
Yeah.
won from Baker. And I saw a piece online, and I thought, we don't have that kind of stick-to-itiveness or that kind of foresight, like this is what's going to happen down the road, the way people did 40, 50
I don't
years
think we
ago.
do. No.
And an example of that, I just stumbled across a piece in the Huffington Post. It was only last April, 5 months ago, that all those girls were taken in Nigeria.
That's right. Yeah.
It said, remember that, bring back our
I
girls?
remember that.
And that was all over Facebook, all over social media. The Huffington Post, or Charlotte Alfred from the Huffington Post in particular, went back and said, let's see, how many were taken? More than 270 of the schoolgirls found themselves in the clutches of the Islamist militant group Boko Haram. Their abduction sparked global outrage and a huge campaign calling for their rescue, partly propelled by the hashtag #BringBackOurGirls.
Yep.
Sunday marked 5 months since the girls were kidnapped. Not one student has been rescued.
That's right. In fact, now that you
In the
mention
first
that,
days after the abduction, 57 girls managed to escape,
yeah.
but no one has escaped or been rescued
I
since.
don't think I've seen any news coverage in months on that. When you mentioned that story, oh yeah, now it comes back to me. But I've seen no coverage in several months on that
But
story.
think about that in terms of how quickly we lose interest
Yeah, you've got
now.
with a 24-hour news cycle, you've got a 24-hour attention span in many ways too.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. They were reported, well, it was reported that they had been located months ago. In May, a Nigerian military official claimed he knew where the girls were being held. A month later, U.S. surveillance planes also spotted a group that officials believed to be the girls. An Australian cleric and mediator said in June that a deal to free the girls had fallen apart 3 different times in 1 month. He says that powerful people with vested interests are working to sabotage a deal, and he has accused Nigerian politicians of funding Boko Haram. Nigeria's government has defended its approach to the crisis and warned that a rescue effort might risk the girls' lives.
Yeah, that was always the major worry, as I recall months ago with that kind of story.
But can you believe that? I mean, this was
that was the
all
hottest
over the
story.
news, and then nothing.
Yep. No, I think it says an awful lot about the nature of our media today. I say we've got a 24-hour attention span for anything,
But it also speaks to
and our lack of foresight for, as you were talking earlier about looking into the future. Trying to if Teddy Roosevelt can imagine national parks that will be valuable a century in the future, can we even look 6 months down the road and imagine what we need to do?
Yeah, we can't even stay on task for 6 months.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the president's saying we're not going to have boots on the ground going to Syria or Iraq. But he's sending resources.
Yeah.
He's kicking things up a notch.
Okay.
Which things matter?
Yeah.
That's the question you have to ask. There's over 200 girls
Yeah.
that have been held hostage for 5 months.
And
It's a one place thing.
if we,
Yeah,
if,
unless they've got them spread all over the
and they may
countryside,
have,
and
who
they
knows?
may
I
have.
guess our intelligence is not as good as we like it to be for that kind of stuff too.
But assuming they think they know where they're all
Right.
being kept,
yeah.
you know, I understand the complication of trying to
And there's
address and deal with an organization like ISIS that has no capital, they have no
Right,
standing
and-
army, they're not redcoats coming down the road.
And ruthless in terms of their behavior anyhow, but still, all in all, what it really does, it kind of remakes the nation-state system, and we're no longer dealing with nations, we're dealing with all these groups that really have.
But this
No,
is something that could be dealt with in a traditional mission kind of way.
Yeah, but it's totally off the radar, as far as I know. Now, maybe somebody behind the scenes is still doing something, but I've not heard a single word on any news broadcast.
Now, if they had all been killed,
It would be,
we'd drone attack them. And I
Yeah.
think that's my beef, is that we have mechanized war to the degree
yeah,
that they can't do a drone attack
because it'll kill them.
because it'll kill them.
And even probably some kind of a special forces attack, depending on how they're being held, might risk them an awful lot.
And everything about foreign policy is evolving into this mechanized drone kind of
Oh, yeah.
army,
It's, well, like, it's a video game.
because we don't want to risk American lives. But if we're not risking American lives, what's our incentive to not do it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
See,
those-
here we have an incentive to not do it.
Precisely.
The girls are still alive.
Yeah. No, war has become a video game. Some guy in Nevada is working on a screen, flying a drone around, launching missiles someplace.
And I'll bet you, just to bring the hour full circle, I will bet you that the drones will get the fast lanes if we don't have net neutrality.
Oh, that's probably a safe bet there. That's probably a safe bet there. Yeah, I think so.
they'll be right up there with Netflix and
Yeah.
the cell towers and everything else. Well, that just about wraps things up for. Or were you going to jump in, John, with something?
No, I was rolling in to see what time it was. You're right, about 50, almost like 57 minutes soon. So.
All right.
Right.
Well, that wraps up hour 2 of our weekly get-together. Next week, we're going to talk about a guy who, we're going to talk with a guy, rather, who's got he's a bestseller, and he has a book out now. He's an architect from Chicago about Legos and construction. And he's got a
Alright.
coffee table book that shows the Lego version of some famous architectural structures.
I think I've seen a few
And-
photographs here and there, maybe online.
And it's going to be kind of an interesting conversation, because I grew up in the era of like Lincoln Logs.
so did I.
And
Yeah.
what were the other things with the little wheels and the
Well,
sticks?
I had Lincoln Logs and American bricks. They were kind
Erector
of
sets.
pressed wooden bricks.
No, that was those were made out of metal. This was wood.
Wood,
Tinker Toys?
No.
Oh yeah, Tinker Toys. Yeah, with the wooden pegs.
Yeah, the wooden
Sure.
pegs, and
Yeah,
you
that's,
could
yeah, I
you
had
could
those
build
too.
them into
That's
structures
right,
and all
that's
that.
right, Yeah.
But the erector set was
I had-
really the higher tech version. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that
moved
often
from
had
Lincoln
little
Logs to
motor
that.
with it so you could make things run and so forth.
We don't have any of that stuff around anymore, but Legos.
Legos does it.
brought that up too, though, about lack of industrial arts in schools.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, every guy knew how to do wiring or knew well. I took welding for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I bet you this generation now wouldn't even know what a welding machine was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a soldering gun, only really big and powerful.
It's,
Anyway, we're going to sign off for today. Well, we will be back next week. We'll have lots more to talk about. We'll probably look at some more local campaigns as we get
Yeah,
closer
we're
and closer.
getting there. We're
It's
just,
the weeks are ticking
6
by.
weeks away, roughly, for the election. We're getting there.
But on behalf of Flint's premier political pundit Paul Rosicki and yours truly, Tom Sumner, John Wilson, and Master Control, thanks for checking it out.
Good to be here.
And thanks to our guests, Trevor and Alan today. Also, if you want to continue, if you want to see us continue this and you want to support us in some way, contact flinttalkradio.com. either to John Wilson or Steve Meyer. Let them know your interest, and we'll get you hooked up, and you can make sure that we keep bringing you interesting interviews and, what would we call it? Comments, analysis,
Comments about what's going on
spin.
in the Genesee County, Flint area, I guess is a way, it's a good summary for it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks a bunch. We'll see you next time. I hope I run into you.